All right, let's go ahead and discuss the play-in tournament recap along with my personal CWL Vegas predictions when it comes down to the group stage. So for those who didn't get to check it out, the play-in tournament did occur yesterday as we saw 4 teams qualify for the technically final position when it comes down to groups. Of course, the open bracket squads will fill the technically final 4 spots. But here are the 4 teams that ended up making it through the play-in tournament. We saw the Pittsburgh Knights followed by straight ripping UYU and the boys from Mindfreak. And I will say there's not too much of a surprise when I read down that list and kind of, internally thinking of some predictions coming into this play-in tournament. Not too much of a surprise. I think you can throw in a squad like Imperial, maybe even Tainted Minds, especially based off of their online placements in the ANZ 2Ks. So I will say not too surprised, but there were a few teams that you could absolutely throw in there. Quickly speaking on UYU, was very impressed with this particular team. They are composed of a few players who have played in the past on teams like GGEA Orange, and kind of over time have kind of made somewhat of a decent placement from time to time. Not really getting out of groups, but still showing some good composure. And we ended up seeing them make a huge 0-2 comeback in the Search and Destroy Game 5. It made a 2-5 comeback, I believe, to win it in round 11 over Imperial, which was a great start for their tournament, which showed great composure, like I said. And then nearly actually swept straight ripping. Went down to Game 5, round 11, but unfortunately lost that overtime round with a Tempest and Vision Pulse, which is unfortunate to see. Pittsburgh, pretty easy tournament for them. Mindfreak's Luca was just absolutely going off, having a very, very solid performance, and it was interesting to watch Mindfreak recover, making it through the losers bracket, as kind of like what they've been known for the last few seasons, are those losers bracket runs, and end up taking down their brethren, technically, their brothers in arms, Tainted Minds, to qualify. And Straight Rippin', probably one of the most impressive teams, which was expected coming into this play-in tournament. Major Maniac was going off, looked very dominant early, and it's not a surprise that we see Straight round out this list. Now, moving on, going to be talking a little bit about the pools, kind of giving a few of my thoughts kind of coming into them, maybe even giving my top 2 of each that I think are going to move on to the winner's bracket, so on and so forth. So let's go and talk about Pool A. We've got 100T, E United, Team Reciprocity, Mindfreak, as well as an open bracket team. Now, ahead of the play-in tournament, this was actually my pool of death. I was very worried to see about how both of these teams, as far as 100T and E United, would go at each other. I thought Team Reciprocity, which I still think all these things, by the way, Team Reciprocity could really make some noise. However, it no longer is, and I'll get into that as the segment continues. But E United currently for me are my second team as far as power rankings are considered, and 100T are my third team. So you can kind of get, at least as far as my opinion, relates, it should be a pretty decent game. They've not played each other yet in an online tournament, which makes this even more of an intense fight. And to me, this particular series is going to be brain versus brawn. Slaying power of 100T versus E United's teamwork and their chemistry, their knowledge, all of those things. I'm excited to watch the combination of Kenny and Abizi versus each other. Abizi looking kind of like how Kenny was ahead of the World War II season. Not saying that we'll see the same stat lines necessarily, but Abizi definitely one of the most or one of the players to definitely look out for, as I mentioned in my video yesterday. I'm really interested as well for 100T to finally see that AR combo, the two guys who have been battling it for that number 1 position in the AR spot over the last few seasons, on the same team in Octane and Slasher. First series, though, of the season last year at Dallas, E United came out and absolutely destroyed Evil Geniuses. For those who do remember, that was Aches' Evil Geniuses squad with like Nameless, Enable, etc. And E were just more prepared. And that's the reason why I think I'm going to give them the edge on this series, is because E United does their homework. They're prepared. They're ready to go to come into this game. And not saying the 100T isn't. However, I think E United knows the game plan. I think they know who they're facing off against. And I think they're going to come into this game knowing map vetoes, knowing all of those things, and just being very, kind of in the right frame of mind. As far as other teams, I think Reciprocity, you shouldn't sleep on this team. I think they're going to have some good moments. I think they could make some noise, could take a few maps off either of these teams. And one thing that's also going to be very interesting is to see Mindfreak actually face off against Reciprocity in this group as well. Because for those who do know, Dens, previously of Mindfreak and longtime player as far as the ANZ region is concerned, one of the greatest in the ANZ region's history. recently moved right to Europe to move to North America on this Team Reciprocity squad. So he's pretty much playing against his brother and playing against his former team last season, and it's going to be a very fun one to watch. So if you guys are looking for a game outside of EU 100T specifically, make sure to watch Reciprocity versus the boys on Mindfreak because it should be fun. As far as my predictions are considered, I got E United coming out in the first spot because I think they will take down 100T due to that knowledge and due to all those things. And I have 100T obviously coming out in second. But watch out for Reciprocity. I'm going to say that now. Moving on quickly to Pool B. This is one of my favorite groups. We've got Luminosity, Red Reserve, Evil Geniuses, and UYU. Red Reserve versus Luminosity. I cannot wait to see this game take place, man. This is going to be a fun one to watch. And the main reason I think it is because of Luminosity, right? Luminosity, their potential is sky high. Their ceiling is up there. They have the big three in Formal, John, and Gunless. Everyone knows that, followed up by a very solid Slacked and Classic. But the question is, how dominant can they be? I feel like when it comes to Luminosity, I feel like I'm the only person who kind of has them in that fourth spot as far as power rankings are considered. There's a lot of people who have them winning this tournament. There's a lot of people who have them in their bottom 9, their bottom 8, etc. So it's not really an in-between. So there's a lot of questions right now on LG and how they can perform. But as far as Red Reserve is considered, there's also a lot of expectations on this team, many having them in their top 3, top 2 discussion from time to time as well. And I think they do possess quite a bit of chemistry that will actually get them over the edge in this series. Like I said, I think for Luminosity, with the loss of JCap and with the loss of maybe not having that designated leader to look toward for guidance, or maybe not necessarily for guidance, but to kind of corral the group together, I think it's going to be a big loss for LG. I think it's going to be a decent learning curve, something that's going to take them a little bit of time to get used to. So I will have Red Reserve coming out in the advantage as far as this series is considered. They do play each other first as well in this group. Evil Geniuses, though, kind of looking toward the bottom side of Pool B, I think could make some noise, more related probably toward Luminosity's end than anything. And I want to say this now. Do not say that no one told you to watch out for EG, because I think they could be a very, very good team, all things considered. You got a really good, solid group of players together. And all players who can also rock the SOG. And I've heard the SOG is fantastic on LAN right now, excluding Gunjar, right? But this team can play really with a great SOG, a great Maddox player kind of playing aggressive. I think they're going to be pretty well set. However, how do they match up against the 2 Titan squads that exist above them? And UYU, they had some good moments in the play-in tournament. I think they are a good group of players, but I just don't think they're ready for the teams that face above them. I think they could have potentially a good series versus EG, but I don't see them really making too much noise when it comes down to the likes of LG and Red Reserve. And obviously, based off my predictions, you could probably guess who I have in number 1, which is Red. I got LG coming in 2. Now moving on to Pool C quickly, trying to get through these as fast as I can. This probably might be my new group of death, and not necessarily to say that the most amount of talent exists in this group. What I'm saying is that I think this could be the most competitive group, which is how I'm looking at my pool of death. Everyone has their own opinions. To me, the most competitive group is the one that I would label as the group or the pool of death. Moving forward, Envy, the world champions, plus Hook. I think we should start off talking about them because I have a very conflicting opinion when it comes down to this particular pool. Many expect Envy to come out of this one, not necessarily in first in a dominant way, but many are predicting them to have their way with this group. And I will say this. Many people have asked me, Landon, how can you doubt the world champions? I don't have them in my top 5 for my power rankings. I don't. And I'm not taking away from them becoming world champions, so don't get that misunderstood, right? Because I am giving them credit for that reason. However, but to the same people who are making that argument, I would then ask you this question. Before they were world champions, we all know how well they placed at Seattle, but before they were world champions, do you know the 2 placements that they had at LAN tournaments leading in to champs? Do you know what their placements were? Do you know who they lost to? CWL Anaheim, top 16. Didn't make it out of groups. Lost to Unilad, Echo Fox, Mindfreak, and then knocked out by E United. The only team they beat in groups was Elevate, a team led by BL Fire and Mochilla. We move on to Stage 2. Do you know what they placed at Stage 2 playoffs? Another question to throw out there. Do you know what they placed at Stage 2 playoffs? Anyone? No? It's because they weren't there. They didn't make it to Stage 2 playoffs. They finished top 10 in Stage 2 while finishing 6th in Division A. And I say all those things to now say this. Hook looks like a top 5 player online. Envy is playing very well in scrims, despite top 32, top 6 placements in major online tournaments. I think if Assault plays at the MVP level he had at Champs, we see a motivated Silly, a consistent and non-mistaking Apathy, and like I said, another put around at this team would be Aches. I think this team can be very good. I think they have a lot of good knowledge when it comes down to their coaching staff, and the reason I want to provide so much clarity on this subject is to justify the reason why I actually have FaZe winning this series versus Envy, and as well taking the number 1 spot in this group. Now, FaZe, I want to point out, let's not count these guys out, because every time we do, they're always there to surprise us. Let's not forget who had the highest respawn KD last season, despite being dropped from multiple squads, speaking on Optic Gaming, speaking on Rise Nation, and Methods. Let's not forget who was top 2 in Respawn Slayer, and all those Twitch clips that we've seen with the SOG so far throughout Black Ops 4 and Zuma. And along with that, we've got Priesta, we've got Attach, and we've got Mr. Consistent replays. I don't know, man. This team on paper works. Methods gets added to this team. We've been giving so much credit to Red Reserve, best team to not win a championship. They add a player who they already have great chemistry with. Phenomenal move. FaZe, they won a championship last year. They add a player who I think only increases their skill moving forward into this season. Something to think about. And like I mentioned in a prior segment, FaZe started off the event last year, the first event of the year at Dallas in the open bracket. They later go on to finish top 4 at the event. CWL Birmingham, top 12 around the same time. They later go on to win Stage 1 in one of the most dramatic series of the entire season. Knocked out in winners round 1 at Champs. Have a 15-3 map count in the losers bracket. And wins that include Elevate, Envy, and E United. And lose a nail-biting Game 5 to Team Caliber. And they finish off, speaking on FaZe, in 3rd place at that event. Now, depending on how FaZe and Envy play, because I think it could be close, Straight Rippin is also right there as well, right? You have to give a lot of credit to Straight Rippin. They have looked phenomenal online. I don't give them as much credit as everyone else has, because I think it is early on to be calling them a top 5, top 4 team in the entire game. So I think Straight Rippin could also be there depending on FaZe and Envy series and how well both of those squads are playing. And you also have to give credit to Lightning Pandas. This team makes sense to me, right? Because you have, what I've been hearing, the IW, the Infinite Warfare Dave is back, and that was a top 10 player in the game, maybe even pushing top 6, top 5 potentially from time to time. You have Alex, who was a breakout player last season. Josh, one of the best in-game leaders in EU COD history, along with PD and a motivated Mad Cat. That to me is a team who I would not want to mess with. So I think this group could be very close. However, I do have FaZe coming in at my number 1 spot, and I think number 2 could be close. I really do. I think number 2 could be close. FaZe could even be close to an extent, and it wouldn't surprise me if we have Straight and or Lightning Pandas involved in this list to an extent. But I've got FaZe, and I've got Envy. Quickly, moving on to Pool D. This, to me, is a very entertaining group of teams that I think we'll see everyone, for the most part, playing for second. Everyone's playing for second as far as this group is considered. Let me go and list off the teams. Splice, Optic Gaming, G2 Esports, and the Pittsburgh Knights. So let me go and get this one out of the way, right? Let me just go and get this one out of the way right now. Optic is the only favorite coming into this event. I do worry about their first series on LAN a little bit, just because of the new talent that they do bring in, especially in the likes of in the likes of Dashy, rather, to an extent. However, 3 out of the 5 players that are in this team are 8-0 when we talk about the last 2 titles in the first event of the season in group play. And I think we will see within the first few series Dashy starting to turn up. I think we're going to see him show why the hype is so real around him. And Search and Destroy, as far as Optic is considered, I think they're going to rapidly improve, if not at Vegas, at least over time. So I think that's something that's really going to be a marvel to watch. And I think we're going to see Crim and Scump really feel more focused, feel more calm. They're no longer worrying about Search and Destroy. They're no longer worrying about the arguments that could form with their team, because they've got 2 very pliable players that they add to this group who help them in certain ways, who fill the roles, and you've got Karma, who's there to save you from time to time and fill in the gaps and make the highlight plays. And I talk about Search and Destroy, and I want to mention this as well. World War II overall stats, when we talk about players and where they placed along with everyone else in the league, Scump, when it comes to respawn KD, was 25th. As far as Search and Destroy KD, he was 35th. And when we talk about, maybe not being able to focus as much, let's talk about Crimsix really quick. Respawn KD, 9th. Search and Destroy KD, 30th. That just goes to show to me a little bit that Optic can now relax when it comes into Search and Destroy to an extent, because you've got 3 players who are very, very good at that game mode, 2 of which you brought in for this exact reason. Now, let's quickly talk about Splice as well. A team I am worried about. A team, if you are a team in this pool, one you have to be wary of. Looney, I think, is a player to watch for this team in terms of leadership, and a group who I think can crumble, but Looney should be there to pick up the pieces, I think. But they do possess a very talented lineup in regards to Timp, Jerd, an incredible SMG duo. You got Accuracy, who is a top 5 player last season, 3-time world champion, 1-time MVP. Like I said, I think Looney was a steal as far as the in-game leadership is considered, and makes this team, to an extent, makes sense, right? This team now makes sense that Looney is on the roster. And you've got Aqua, who has secretly been a top-tier AR for, you can maybe even argue, since Advanced Warfare. This guy has constantly been swept under the radar, not really, or kind of rather slept on to an extent. And I just think that this team on paper makes a lot of sense in regards to the talent that they possess. However, I am worried, because I think there will be a breaking point at some point for Splice. I think there will be a time where a series doesn't go their way and an argument starts to form that could easily divide this group of 5. And I don't know if Looney will be able to corral them enough to make sure that it happens. Accuracy likes to talk. Temp likes to talk. And so that's a little bit of my concern from time to time. Same thing with Aqua, right? That's my concern with this group, is if they don't see a series that goes their way, if they maybe lose a few excess maps to G2 or Pittsburgh Knights, maybe they get dominated by Optic Gaming in a way they feel like they shouldn't, that's where my concern comes from. But you can't doubt the talent that Splice has, that's for sure. Moving on to G2 and Pittsburgh Knights, I wouldn't say to sleep on either of these teams. I think they can have a solid showing as far as just overall maps are considered. I think they could maybe take 1 or 2 maybe off of Splice. I think they might have a good moment versus Optic Gaming, but I don't think they're really going to make too much of a splash when it comes down to this group. As far as G2, a team to look out for, or players to look out for, are going to be Blast and Decimate. I think for Pittsburgh Knights, you got to look at Lacefield as well as GodRX, who has been playing very well, and especially toward the end of World War II. But as far as my predictions on this group, I've got Optic Gaming in first, and I've got Splice coming in second. However, I am very careful to say Splice coming in second. Just my opinion, of course. But if you have, speaking of opinions, any other ones, as far as my list or anything that I talked about as far as groups are considered, you can feel free to let your voice be known on social media by using the hashtag the Esports Dispatch as well. You can also, for provided coverage, check out CWL Vegas, which begins today on December 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 10 p.m. GMT and 9 a.m. AEDT.